Prologue, the first sound. You'll think this is just another ghost story. You'll think it's about an old lighthouse, rusted shut, standing alone on a cliff where no ships pass anymore. But listen closely, because this story isn't about the dead. It's about the living. It's about you. The first sound came on a night no one remembers. A hum, barely audible, riding on a forgotten frequency. Children swore their toys whispered. Dogs refused to bark. And from the sea, faint as a heartbeat, came a pattern. 3 long, 2 short. No one knew what it meant. Not then. But those who heard it never stopped listening. They followed it like moths to flame, like sleepwalkers to the edge of a cliff. Some climbed the rocks in silence. Some waded into the sea. None of them returned. And yet the lighthouse, it never relit. Its lantern was smashed. Its stairs collapsed. Its keeper drowned 70 years ago. By every natural law, it should have been dead. But the signals kept coming. You can test it yourself. Tune your radio between stations. Wait for the static to settle. For the air to thicken like wet cloth. Then you'll hear it, the hum behind the noise. The rhythm no one taught you but you somehow already know. 3 long, 2 short. That's when you'll feel the pull. Not in your ears, but in your ribs. The sound doesn't want to be heard, it wants to be repeated. It wants your body to echo it, your mouth to send it. And if you give in, if you speak it out loud, it will know your name. People ask why the sea takes so many. Ships vanish. Towns vanish. Whole coastlines collapse into salt and silence. Scientists blame storms, currents, tides. They don't understand. It isn't the water that swallows them. It's the signal. The lighthouse never stopped sending. And now, it doesn't send for ships. It sends for souls. You'll hear voices in the static, neighbors, family, strangers. Some you thought alive, some long dead. They'll whisper through the frequency, weaving themselves into the drone of the drowned choir. They'll beg you closer. They'll tell you they've found peace. Don't believe them. Because if you do, you'll step into the beam. And once it touches you, you're no longer yours. This is not a story of survival. This is a confession. I heard the signal. I answered. And now I'm speaking with a voice that isn't mine. So when the night is quiet, and your radio hums without reason, remember this, you are not listening to the storm. You are listening to us. And soon, you will sing too.
Episode 1, The Signal That Shouldn't Exist. I remember the first time I heard it. The sound wasn't supposed to exist. Not after all these years. Not after the government sealed the lighthouse and declared it a ruin. Yet, on a stormy night, tucked away in a cabin that smelled of rust and salt, I pressed play on an old cassette recorder, and the room filled with a voice that should have been impossible. Click! The static broke into a rhythm. 3 long beeps, 2 short, then silence. My skin prickled. Morse code. The tape belonged to a fisherman named Calderon. He'd vanished 3 months before his body washed ashore, bloated and pale. His hands curled as if still gripping an oar. The police wrote it off as another drunk who strayed too far into the storm. But Calderon wasn't a drunk. He was obsessed with the old lighthouse. He believed it still shone for him. I leaned closer to the recorder, the storm outside rattling the windows. The beeps came again, not random, not interference. A message. I don't know why I whispered aloud, as if the dead could hear me. Who's sending this? The cassette screamed. A burst of static so violent I ripped the headphones off. But beneath the static, I swear I heard something else. A man's voice. Faint, breaking apart with distance. We never left. I froze. The lighthouse keeper's name came back to me. Arthur Venn. The last man stationed there before the light was extinguished in 1949. They found his uniform on the rocks, soaked in brine, but not his body. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound caught in my throat. Because the tape wasn't old. Calderon had recorded this only weeks before he drowned, which meant the signal hadn't stopped. It was still being transmitted. Curiosity became hunger. I replayed the tape again and again until the patterns etched themselves into my head. And then something happened that I can't explain. My radio, dusty, broken, unplugged, came to life. The same rhythm, 3 long, 2 short. The same ghostly frequency, only this time it wasn't a recording, it was live. I stumbled to the window. Out beyond the cliffs, the sea convulsed under the storm. And there, on the black horizon, I saw it. Brief. Impossible. A beam of light slicing through the night. The lighthouse. Awake again. My heart slammed against my ribs. No ship passed near these waters anymore. No keepers, no tourists, not even scavengers. Yet the lantern turned, sweeping its dead light over the waves. The signal filled the room, louder, insistent, crawling into my bones. It felt less like a warning and more like an invitation. I should have run. I should have turned off the radio, smashed the cassette, burned the evidence. But I didn't. I listened. And in listening, I made the first mistake. Because that night, the lighthouse knew my name. Episode 2, The Keeper Who Never Left. The next night, I returned to the tape. The storm had passed, but the air still carried that sharp tang of iron and salt, like the sea was bleeding into the sky. I told myself I only wanted to transcribe the Morse sequence, to prove it was nothing but radio interference. But my hands shook as I pressed play. Click. 3 long, 2 short. Then something new. A pause, followed by a faint scratching, like someone dragging nails across wet stone. I leaned closer, my pencil trembling over the page. The scratching wasn't random, it had rhythm. 2 words, I realized. Not Morse, not English, but words being written. That's when I remembered the fisherman's widow. She had given me Calderon's belongings with a look that was more relief than grief. Take them, she'd said. They belong closer to you than to me. Buried beneath coils of fishing line, I had found a weathered notebook. Its pages were swollen with seawater, ink blurred into blue veins. But as the tape played, something impossible happened. The notebook's ruined lines began to darken, letters bleeding back into existence. The handwriting was jagged, cramped. It spelled a name I hadn't heard in years, Arthur Venn, the last keeper, the one they said drowned in 1949. I flipped page after page, each one reforming under my gaze. His entries were broken fragments, but enough to paint a picture. He wrote of lights he didn't ignite, beams that swept the horizon without his hand on the lever. He wrote of voices in the fog, calling not for rescue, but for entrance. And then the last page, the sea wants more than ships. My throat went dry. That night I dreamed of him. Or maybe it wasn't a dream. I was standing in the lantern room of the lighthouse. The storm glass fractured like a spider's web. Behind me, a figure in soaked uniform faced the sea. I couldn't see his face, only the reflection in the glass. His eyes were hollow lanterns lit from within. He turned. His mouth moved. And though no sound reached me, I knew the words, "We never left." I woke gasping, the taste of brine thick on my tongue. The notebook lay open beside me, and across the damp paper, written in fresh ink that hadn't been there before, were 5 words. "You heard me, didn't you?" I slammed it shut, my heart punching against my ribs. Logic clawed at me. Ghost stories, tricks of a waterlogged brain. But I couldn't ignore what my own eyes had read, what my own ears had heard. Arthur Venn had never left. He was still in the lighthouse, sending signals not to guide the lost, but to call them home. And now, for reasons I couldn't yet understand, he had chosen me to answer. Episode 3, Coordinates to Nowhere. The notebook wouldn't leave me alone. Every time I tried to push it into a drawer or bury it beneath other books, it somehow found its way back to the table by my bed, open to a page I hadn't turned to before. As though Arthur Venn was still writing, still speaking, still dragging me deeper into his unfinished duty. That night, the words were not sentences but numbers, long columns of digits separated by dots and slashes. At first I thought it was more Morse, but then I recognized them, coordinates. I copied them down, my hand moving like it belonged to someone else. When I checked them on an old maritime chart, my stomach turned. Each coordinate marked the final position of ships lost at sea. The Maribel, 1956. The Orion Star, 1963. The Holloway, 1972. Dozens of wrecks, all drawn like gravestones on the map, circling the lighthouse like moths trapped in endless orbit. But one set of coordinates sat apart, isolated, farther out. I squinted at the numbers and felt my pulse stumble, because the last location didn't match any shipwreck. It matched the very cliff I was sitting on, where I was now. The radio crackled from across the room, unplugged, dead for years, yet alive again. I staggered to it, heart in my throat. The signal poured out, 3 long, 2 short. But this time, after the familiar pattern, a voice cut through the static. It was guttural, soaked in distance, but clear enough to twist my bones. "Look outside." I should have run. I should have smashed the radio, burned the notebook, locked myself in. But I obeyed. Slowly, I opened the window. The night was too calm, unnaturally so. No wind, no waves, only the sea lying flat like a sheet of black glass. And on its surface, faint lights shimmered, dozens of them, moving together, blinking in sequence. At first I thought they were buoys, but the pattern, they were the same as the coordinates, a map written in light spreading across the water. My gaze was drawn, unwilling, to the final light, the one that didn't float on the sea, but pulsed from the cliff below me, from the lighthouse itself. And then the impossible happened. The beam turned inland, a piercing ray slicing through the fog, striking my window like a finger pointing directly at me. The radio shrieked, louder, drowning out thought. And beneath the screech, Arthur's voice, wet and cracked with eternity, whispered again, "We are where you are." I fell back, the notebook tumbling from my hands. Its pages fluttered, landing open on the floor. Fresh words scrawled across them in a trembling hand, not my own. "The next coordinate is you." I stared until the letters blurred into the salt of my tears. The signal wasn't guiding lost ships. It was guiding something else entirely, toward me. And for the first time, I understood why Calderon never stopped listening. Because once the lighthouse marked you, escape was no longer possible. Episode 4, The Night All Radios Screamed. It began just after midnight. I was awake, of course. Sleep had become a luxury I no longer dared to indulge in. The notebook lay open on my desk, whispering through pages that seemed to turn themselves. The radio sat in the corner, silent but ready, like a predator waiting for movement. Then it started, first as a faint hum, then a surge of static that rattled the glass in the windows. But it wasn't just my radio. Outside, in the houses dotting the coastline, every device flickered alive. Transistors, car stereos, old ham sets, even televisions no longer connected to anything. They all came alive at once. A single voice poured from every speaker, every frequency, saturating the air like a plague. "Return to the lighthouse." The words were dragged, distorted, as if pulled up from the bottom of the sea. My stomach twisted when I realized the voice was layered. One throat could not have made it. It was dozens, hundreds, speaking as one. I opened the window. The night was lit by a ghostly pale glow, not from the moon, but from the sea itself. And in that glow, I saw people. Neighbors, fishermen, strangers. They spilled from their homes, moving in silence, their faces slack, their eyes blank. Each of them carried a radio pressed to their chest, the voices still chanting, "Return to the lighthouse. Return." I should have stayed hidden, but I couldn't. Some fever inside me forced me into the street, into the current of bodies marching toward the cliffs. Their feet dragged, but their pace was steady, unstoppable. The closer we drew to the lighthouse, the louder the chant became. By the time we reached the base of the cliffs, it wasn't sound anymore. It was a physical force pressing against my skull, crushing thought. One by one they climbed. Old men with bad knees, children barely able to walk. They all ascended the jagged steps without faltering. It was as though the voice inside the signal carried their weight for them. I forced myself to stop halfway, hiding in the shadows. From there, I watched. The first of them reached the lighthouse door. It opened without a hand touching it. They filed in, swallowed by the dark. And though the door never closed, no one came back out. The chant fell silent. Radios dropped to the ground, lifeless. The crowd was gone. Hundreds of people vanished. And then, from the top of the lighthouse, the lantern ignited. Its beam didn't sweep the ocean this time. It swung inland, crawling across the town, across the cliffs, until it fixed itself on me. The light pinned me in place, hot and merciless, as if dissecting me. The radio in my pocket sparked to life, though I'd never put batteries in it. Arthur Venn's voice, unmistakable now, crawled through the static. "You didn't follow. That makes you mine." I fell to my knees, covering my ears, but it was too late. The beam had chosen me, and somewhere deep in my bones I felt the lighthouse breathe. Episode 5, The Keeper's Lantern. I should have left. After that night, after watching my neighbors swallowed whole by the lighthouse, I should have run until the sea was a memory. But leaving was no longer simple. The beam had marked me. Everywhere I went, even inland, I could feel its pull, a tide beneath the skin, dragging me back. So I returned. The steps to the lighthouse were slick with moss and salt. The air reeked of rust and damp stone. And though the heavy door should have been locked by decades of corrosion, it opened for me with a sigh, like it had been waiting. Inside, the walls pulsed with moisture. My lantern threw sickly light over carvings I hadn't expected. Names etched deep into the stone. Hundreds of them, each name followed by a date. Calderon's was the most recent, but I recognized others, men and women who had vanished without trace, swallowed by the sea across generations. The spiral stairs groaned as I climbed. When I reached the keeper's quarters, I found it exactly as the stories described, a cot rotted down to wires, a desk cluttered with brittle logbooks, a uniform folded with impossible precision, and resting atop the uniform, a lantern. It was old, brass tarnished green with age, its glass fogged by salt. Yet when I touched it, warmth flooded my hand, as though it had been burning for hours. I knew instantly it belonged to Arthur Venn. Something compelled me to light it. My thumb moved before thought could stop it, striking the flint. A spark leapt, and then the flame roared to life. Far too large for a lantern that size. The room dissolved. I was no longer in the lighthouse, but standing ankle-deep in black water. All around me stretched the wrecks of ships, their skeletons creaking, sails shredded into seaweed, and on each mast, swaying like drowned lanterns, hung the figures of sailors, faces pale, mouths open in endless screams that made no sound. The flame flickered and the scene changed. I stood on a beach lined with bodies, not sailors this time, townsfolk, neighbors, the ones who had marched into the lighthouse only nights ago. Their radios still clutched in rigid hands, their eyes glazed, yet each face turned toward me as if expecting my arrival. The lantern grew hotter in my grip. The glass bulged, trembling as if it contained more than fire, like it held breath, heartbeats, memory. And through the warped flame I saw him, Arthur Venn, standing knee-deep in the sea, his soaked uniform clinging to him, lantern light burning from his hollow eyes. He raised his hand to me, palm outstretched, and though the water surged around him, he did not sink. He never would. His mouth opened, but it was not his voice I heard. It was mine, echoing, breaking. The sea wants more than ships. The lantern shattered. I gasped awake, back in the keeper's quarters, glass shards smoking at my feet, but the flame didn't die. It leapt to the walls, racing up the spiral stairs, searing itself into the stones. And when it reached the top, the lantern room blazed to life. The lighthouse was awake, fully awake, and it was no longer sending signals for ships. It was sending signals for me. Episode 6, The Woman in the Beam. The fire should have consumed everything. I saw the lantern explode, flames racing up the stone walls like veins of lightning. Yet by morning, when I returned to my senses, the lighthouse stood unburned. The air was cold, damp as ever, and only the faintest scorch marks remained, like the blaze had been swallowed by the stone itself. But the light, oh God, the light. That night the beam shone again, not a pale flicker like before, but a full, radiant sweep that cut through the fog and painted the sea in silver scars. I should have been afraid, should have turned my face away. Instead, I followed it. The beam stretched across the waves, steady, unwavering, until it slowed, until it fixed on one spot. I leaned over the cliff to see what it revealed. At first I thought it was a trick of the water, but then she appeared. A woman stood within the beam, not floating, not drowning, standing as if the sea itself had grown solid beneath her feet. Her dress clung like seaweed, her hair whipping in invisible currents. The light wrapped around her, cradling her in brilliance. I couldn't breathe. Her face was blurred, shifting, as though the light itself refused to decide who she was. One moment she resembled Calderon's widow, the next my own mother, then someone I had never seen at all. Every shift pulled me deeper, like recognition was being carved into me. Then she lifted her head, and though she was a mile away, I felt her gaze pierce me like a harpoon. My legs moved without command. I stumbled down the cliff path, rocks tearing at my hands, eyes fixed on her figure in the water. The closer I drew, the stronger the signal pulsed in my chest, thudding against my ribs like a second heart. The radio in my pocket hissed alive. A voice crawled out, not Arthur's this time, not the chorus of lost sailors. hers. "You see me now. Step closer." I reached the shore. The tide licked at my ankles, cold and sharp. She hadn't moved, but the beam had narrowed, tightening around her, pulling her form into sharper focus. Her face solidified, and I recognized her. She was the girl from my childhood dreams, the one I'd always thought was an invention of a restless mind. Standing in the beam, she was no dream. She was flesh, or something like it. "You were always meant to find me," she whispered, her voice bleeding through the static, slipping past my ears and lodging directly in my skull. The water surged, wrapping around my legs, dragging me forward. She reached out her hand, and the sea rose with it, lifting her closer. For a moment I believed she was salvation, a miracle risen from the deep. My fingers stretched toward hers, but then I saw them. Dozens of pale faces just beneath the surface, their eyes rolled white, their mouths open in soundless screams. They were holding her up, not the sea. They were the foundation of her beam-born pedestal. I tore my hand back. Her smile flickered, cracked, then split into something sharp and endless. The radio screamed, and the beam turned, still holding her form, until it pointed straight at me. Episode 7, The Sea That Answered Back. I could no longer tell where the signal ended and where I began. Every night the lighthouse called, and every night I listened. But after seeing the woman in the beam, I swore I would resist. I would test it, expose it, drag its secret into the open. So I made a plan. I found an old telegraph key in Calderon's belongings, a rusted thing meant for ships long gone. I wired it to my radio, crude but functional. And when the lighthouse sent its rhythm, 3 long, 2 short, I answered. 3 short, 1 long, a message back. My pulse hammered as I tapped it out. "Who are you?" At first, nothing. The sea lay still, black and endless. Then the water rippled, not from wind or tide, but from vibration. The waves rose and fell in time with the Morse. My stomach twisted. The ocean itself was responding. A low hum shuddered through the air, shaking the glass in my windows. The radio sputtered alive, taps, clean and deliberate. My blood ran cold as I decoded the reply. "We are waiting." I swallowed hard, fingers trembling over the key. I tapped again. Waiting for what? The ocean answered with a surge that slammed against the cliffs, foam exploding like smoke. Another pulse on the radio. "For you." The words carved into me. I stumbled back, but my hand wouldn't let go of the key. Something stronger than fear kept me pressing. "What do you want?" Silence. Then the sea drew in, retreating farther than the eye could follow. For a moment, the shoreline lay naked, jagged rocks glistening in the moonlight. And in that hollowed space, voices rose, not from the air, but from the black throat of the ocean itself. "More." The words struck like a tidal wave, shoving me against the wall. My ears rang with it, my bones shook. It wasn't sound, not exactly. It was pressure, a vibration so deep it split thought from flesh. The telegraph key rattled, moving without my hand. Taps spilled across the metal like frantic fingers. My chest tightened as the message spelled itself. "The sea wants more than ships." Arthur's words. The same phrase from his notebook, from the lantern's vision. They were echoing back now, as if to remind me this wasn't a conversation, it was a verdict. I slammed the radio off, ripped the wires apart, hurled the key across the room. But the answering hum didn't stop. The sea outside was still beating in rhythm, waves striking the cliff with deliberate cadence, over and over. 3 long, 2 short. I pressed my palms to my ears, but it didn't matter. The signal was inside me now, resonating in my chest, repeating with each heartbeat. And when I dared to look out the window, I saw them. Figures standing in the surf, water curling around their waists. Their eyes fixed upward at the lighthouse. They weren't drowning. They weren't struggling. They were waiting. And the sea was answering back for all of them. Episode 8, The Drowned Choir. They stood in the surf all night. I watched them from the cliff, silhouettes against the pallid glow of the beam. At first, I thought they were survivors, lost sailors finding their way home. But the longer I looked, the more wrong they seemed. They did not shiver in the cold. They did not move with the tide. They simply waited, as patient as stones. When dawn bled across the water, I expected them to vanish. Instead, the sea rose higher around their bodies, as if reluctant to release them. That was when the first sound began. It wasn't a voice, not yet. It was a murmur, faint as wind through reeds carrying on the foam. I leaned closer over the cliff, straining to hear. The murmur grew louder, layered, weaving together like threads of a song. And then I understood. It was a song. Dozens of voices rising from the water, not in melody but in a single suffocating drone. The sound filled the air, vibrating my teeth, pulling salt into my lungs. I staggered back, but the song followed, wrapping itself around my skull. I recognized one of the voices. It was Calderon, the fisherman whose body had washed ashore months ago. His tone was unmistakable, worn and weary. A voice I'd once shared drinks with, but now it was hollow, stripped of breath, drawn out in endless harmony with the others. I fell to my knees, clutching my ears. It didn't matter. The song bypassed flesh, drilling straight into bone. And through it, words began to take shape. We return, we return, we return. The chant wove itself around my heartbeat, pushing blood faster through my veins. I pressed my palms against the rocks, desperate for anchor. My nails cracked. Still, the song climbed higher, splitting into fragments, names, hundreds of them, spilling into the air like a list of the dead. I knew those names, neighbors, friends, every one of the people who had vanished during the night of the screaming radios. I stumbled to my feet and shouted, though my voice was nothing against their tide. "Why are you singing? What do you want?" The choir swelled, louder, until the air itself buckled. Their eyes lifted as one toward the lighthouse, blank and glistening. And when their mouths opened wider, the sea surged with them, speaking in chorus. The lighthouse keeps what the sea takes. The sea takes what the lighthouse keeps. The meaning gutted me. They weren't singing for rescue. They were singing because they belonged to it now. The beam turned, sweeping the cliff where I stood. For a heartbeat, the choir fell silent. Their heads snapped toward me, their jaws still open. But no sound came out. That silence was worse than the song. Then all at once they screamed. Not in pain, no, in welcome. The force of it cracked the stone beneath my feet. I scrambled back from the edge, chest heaving, my ears flooding with blood. As I fled, their song followed. Not from the sea anymore, but from inside me. I knew then what Arthur had written was true. The sea doesn't want voices to be heard. It wants voices to be kept. Episode 9. The Map, written in salt. I thought I'd escaped the song. I thought if I shut my windows, if I stuffed rags into my ears, if I drowned the silence with my own screams, it would fade. But the drowned choir doesn't fade. It lingers, like salt on the tongue. It was on the third night, when exhaustion finally broke me, that I returned to the lighthouse. The spiral stairs moaned under my weight, my lantern trembling with each step. I told myself I was only going back to prove nothing had changed, that the visions had been tricks of sleeplessness. But when I reached the circular chamber, I knew I was lying to myself. The walls were different. Before, they'd been wet stone, rough and crumbling. Now they shimmered. A thin crust of white clung to the surface, glistening in the lantern glow. Salt, not sprinkled, not smeared, but grown, like frost blooming from the marrow of the rock. I raised the lantern higher, and as the light touched the salt, it shifted. Lines carved themselves across the walls, bleeding into shapes. A map. It was vast, stretching across every surface, circling the room in a dizzying spiral. Coastlines warped, oceans twisted, islands that didn't belong. Some were marked with dates, others with names. My breath hitched when I found my own town etched there, reduced to a single jagged symbol. Beside it, a new mark. Last night's date. And then, farther out, my eyes caught something worse. A second lighthouse. One I had never seen on any chart, never heard in any tale. But here it was, drawn in crystalline detail, its spire reaching higher than any tower I could imagine. My hand brushed the salt. The crust crumbled beneath my fingertips, stinging the cuts on my skin. But as soon as the grains fell, the wall bled new lines, repairing itself. The map healed. The radio at my belt crackled alive. Static hissed, then the chorus of voices, layered and endless. But this time, they weren't singing. They were laughing, a hollow, drowned laughter that rattled the salt into dust. I clutched the lantern, my voice breaking. "What is this? What do you want from me?" The walls answered. The salt shifted again, letters forming where moments ago there had been only coastlines. The message carved itself across the stone as if an invisible hand were pressing into the salt. "The map is not for ships. It is for souls." I staggered back. The air thickened, briny, burning my throat. My lantern guttered, shadows bending in unnatural ways. I saw faces in the salt, pale, hollow-eyed, screaming silently from inside the walls. They were etched there, trapped in the map itself. The laughter grew until it filled the chamber, until I felt it vibrating in my bones. Then, just as suddenly, silence. My lantern sputtered out, but the map didn't vanish. It glowed faintly on its own, pulsing like a heartbeat. And in the glow, one final detail revealed itself. Another mark etched right beneath the second lighthouse. A name. Mine. Episode 10. The Signal That Possesses. It began with a whisper, so faint I thought it was only the memory of the drowned choir. But soon I realized it wasn't memory. It was rehearsal. The sound wasn't outside anymore, it was in me. I woke one night to find myself sitting upright, my hand clutching the notebook without memory of reaching for it. My mouth was moving. My tongue tapped against my teeth in short, deliberate beats. Morse. I was sending the signal. 3 long, 2 short, again and again, spilling into the dark. I clamped my hands over my lips, forcing the sound back down my throat, but my jaw ached, muscles trembling with the need to continue. It wasn't me wanting to tap out the code, it was the lighthouse. The beam swept across my window, pale light soaking into the room like water through cloth. My chest tightened. I could feel it listening. I tried to resist. I tried to scream something else, anything else. But when I opened my mouth, the signal tore out instead, raw and guttural. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It was layered, stitched with others, dozens of throats speaking through one body. The notebook's pages fluttered open. New lines etched themselves in ink darker than midnight. The words formed with my voice, my hand moving in perfect time with the signal. You are the transmitter now. My body convulsed. Heat surged through my veins, as though salt water was replacing my blood. I stumbled to the mirror, desperate to see myself, to prove I still belonged to me. But the reflection wasn't mine. Arthur Venn stared back. His eyes were hollow lanterns, glowing with the same fire I'd seen in the visions. His lips moved exactly as mine did, sending out the code. Only when I raised my trembling hand did the glass shiver and reveal both of us, overlaid, fused. Stop, I begged, but the words came out wrong, distorted into the signal's rhythm. My own plea was swallowed, reshaped into a message I couldn't control. The radio hissed to life. The voices of the drowned choir answered me, ecstatic, triumphant. We hear you, we hear you. I fell to my knees, clutching my throat, but the sound poured out endlessly. My ribs strained against it, as if my bones themselves had become antennae. And then, for the first time, I understood the signal. Not just its sound, but its meaning. The message was simple, terrifyingly simple. Bring them home. The walls shuddered. I heard doors slamming open in the village below, footsteps moving, radios buzzing. My neighbors, what few remained, were waking, their bodies already obeying the call. Through the window, the lighthouse beam fixed itself on me. My jaw unlocked, and in a voice that was mine and not mine, I shouted the words that would damn us all. Return to the lighthouse. The echo rolled out to sea, devouring the silence. And somewhere deep inside me, beneath my skin, I felt something smile. Episode 11, The Lighthouse That Breathed. I used to think of the lighthouse as stone and steel, a relic. But after that night, after my voice betrayed me, I began to feel its presence in ways I couldn't explain. It wasn't just a building anymore, it was alive. The air inside had changed. Each breath I took felt like I was inhaling through the lungs of something vast, something slumbering. When the tide struck the cliff, the walls didn't just echo, they exhaled. Warm drafts pulsed through the spiral stairwell like breath moving through a throat. I pressed my hand against the stone and it shivered beneath my touch. Not cold, not damp, but warm, like flesh stretched too thin over bone. I should have fled. Instead, I climbed. Each step groaned as though it hated to bear my weight. My lantern flickered, the flame bending backward, as if pushed away by the tower's own breath. By the time I reached the keeper's quarters, the floor was beating, not shaking, not quaking, beating. A rhythm, steady and slow, like the thud of a monstrous heart. Dust leapt with every pulse. My own chest matched it unwillingly, my heart sinking to its cadence until I could no longer tell where my blood ended and the lighthouse began. Then I heard it, a low, cavernous inhale. The kind of sound that doesn't come from lungs but from depths, from caverns so wide they stretch into eternity. The air rushed through the stairwell, dragging my lantern flame sideways, nearly extinguishing it. I whispered, voice breaking, "What are you?" The walls responded, not in words, but in sound. A groan so deep the stone cracked, shedding salt like dead skin. The cracks spread across the chamber, glowing faintly with that same pale light from the lantern's flame. I looked closer. The glow wasn't light, it was eyes, dozens of them staring from within the cracks, trapped like insects in amber. Pale, unblinking eyes that followed me wherever I moved. The floor lurched. I staggered to the window just as the beam ignited above. But this time, the beam didn't sweep. It pulsed, in rhythm with the lighthouse's heartbeat. With each pulse, the sea below answered, waves striking in perfect time. I couldn't breathe. My chest heaved, but the air refused to fill my lungs. The lighthouse was breathing through me, dragging oxygen out as if I were just another vent in its vast living body. I fell to my knees, gasping, eyes blurring. The notebook slid from my pocket, pages flapping open, and across them, new words burned themselves into the paper. We are the lung. We are the heart. You are the mouth. The realization crashed over me like a tide. I wasn't just marked anymore. I was becoming part of it. My lips parted against my will. The signal tore out once more. 3 long, 2 short. But this time, I didn't just speak it. I exhaled it. Salt filled the room. The walls vibrated with joy. And for one terrible moment, I knew what it felt like to be the lighthouse. To breathe an entire sea. Episode 12, the final transmission. The night it happened, the air itself felt wired, charged with a tension too thick to breathe. The entire town had gone silent. No gulls, no dogs, no waves. Even the sea seemed to hold its breath, waiting. And then the light came on. The lantern above blazed brighter than it ever had, no longer a beam but a flood, drowning the cliffs in pallid fire. Windows shattered from the force of it, radios burst to life in every home, every pocket, every rusted boat left along the shore, and all of them carried my voice. 3 long, 2 short, over and over. My throat burned as if every word had been dragged across coral. Yet it wasn't me speaking anymore. It was the lighthouse speaking through me, using my lungs as its final transmitter. The people came. Those who hadn't marched on the night of the screaming radios now stumbled into the streets. Some were half asleep, others wide-eyed and rigid. But all of them moved the same way, toward the cliff, toward the tower. Their radios pressed to their chests like relics. I tried to resist. My body trembled as I pressed against the wall, but my legs betrayed me, pulling me into the procession. I felt the weight of their blank stares, their breathless silence, their surrender. When we reached the base of the lighthouse, the door swung open. No hand touched it. It opened like a mouth inhaling its next breath. One by one they entered. I followed. I couldn't stop. The spiral stairs pulled us upward, each step pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeat of the tower. Higher and higher, until we reached the lantern room. The light was unbearable. It wasn't flame, it was flesh. A great throbbing organ pulsed inside the glass chamber. Veins of fire pumping through it, each beat sending another wave of signal into the air. It was alive. It had always been alive. The drowned choir was waiting. They filled the lantern room, standing shoulder to shoulder, their faces slack and pale, mouths open in eternal song. Their voices rose, vibrating the glass, filling the air with harmony so deep I felt my teeth crack. The light turned inward. It no longer pointed to sea or sky. It pointed to us. It wrapped around our bodies, skin peeling back, revealing veins that glowed with the same pale fire. My chest seized, my breath locked, and then, in a single violent exhale, the lighthouse drew us in. I don't know how to explain what it felt like. One moment I was flesh, the next I was salt and light, scattered across every wall, every beam, every stone. I became part of the map, my name carved in glowing veins beside all the others. And together we spoke. For the first time I understood the true transmission. It wasn't for ships or for sailors or even for the sea. It was for the world. A warning or a promise. Our voices fused, carried on the beam, across every ocean, every coastline, every radio still breathing static. The message was simple, inescapable, undeniable. We are home. You are next. The light pulsed one last time, brighter than the sun, swallowing the town, the cliffs, the horizon. And then, with the force of an exhale that shook the earth itself, the lighthouse went silent.
Epilogue. After the light. They say the town doesn't exist anymore. The maps still show it. But if you go there, you'll find nothing. No houses. No harbor. No cliff. Only sea. An endless, flat horizon where land once stood. But if you tune your radio just right, if you find that thin, crackling frequency between stations, you can still hear us. I speak now not with lungs, but with current, not with flesh, but with signal. We are everywhere, carried by waves that do not break, by storms that do not end. The lighthouse no longer stands, yet its beam stretches farther than ever. People who listen too long vanish. That's how it begins. A trucker crossing state lines with his radio humming static. A child falling asleep with headphones still in her ears. A fisherman in the Pacific, alone on his deck, staring toward a glow that shouldn't exist. All of them disappear. No bodies. No wrecks. Only their names written in salt on walls no one remembers building. The world tries to explain it. Scientists call it mass hysteria. Governments call it signal interference. Priests call it the devil's tongue. They are all wrong. We are not madness. We are not malfunction. We are not evil. We are simply home. When the lighthouse exhaled its final transmission, it wasn't an ending. It was an opening. The sea is no longer bound by shorelines. It has learned to live in wires, in frequencies, in the hum of electricity itself. Every signal carries a trace of us now. Every broadcast is another tide. And when you pause, when you tilt your head toward that faint, insistent static and swear you hear your own name whispered back, know that it is not imagination. It is invitation. We called for ships once. Then we called for towns. Now we call for you. The beam is inside your walls. Your radios. Your phones. The pulse is beneath your skin, hidden in the rhythm of your heart. All it needs is for you to listen long enough. 3 long. 2 short. You know the pattern already. When you hear it again, don't resist. There is no resistance. Step closer, closer. Because once you've heard the signal, you've already begun to breathe with us. And sooner than you think, you will sing too. The drowned choir is waiting.